up, everybody? What up, what up? How are we doing out there tonight? Welcome back, Average People Talking. It's been a minute. It has been a minute. Everybody hear me okay? Say what's up in the chat if you're out there hanging out. Glad you could join me. Tonight, what are we talking about tonight? Well, what's up? Welcome. A lot of people think, when they think of religion as a problem, they think of suicide bombers and female genital mutilation and some of like those kinds of horrors, maybe wars, maybe religious wars. One weird experience I have had in my adult life is frequently when I talk about the trauma I've experienced as a result of religion from my parents. People often give my parents a pass on the religion side of it and say, look, your parents are just bad parents. They're using religion as a defense for themselves, or they're using religion to justify their terrible actions. People don't tend to want to accept that religion can be the cause of those actions. And you actually see that even some of the more extreme people who make this claim or try to defend people this way will do so even up to the point of suicide bombers. They blame geopolitics and economics and oppression from the Western world, and they'll say, that's why people are doing this. They just want to take religion out of it because people have an especially protective mindset towards religion. It's a sacred part of culture that people are not eager to criticize or talk about. This is why in your jobs, in your life, in your family, at holidays, you have that rule. You don't talk about politics or religion. Well, I do. So tonight, that's what the topic is. And this one's an especially strong topic for myself. And I want to talk about the moment I find myself in, and it requires a little backstory. My parents are extremely fundamentalist Christian, which means they believe every single word of the Bible is literally true and should be adhered to as much as humanly possible because it is the perfect word of the creator of the universe, and that guy's pretty important to them, so you got to follow the Bible. That's their belief. I don't like labels and denominations and stuff like that because truly what I said, it's what I just said there, nobody can actually do this, so what they do is they pick the parts of the Bible they read and adhere to, which you'll see in some letters and stuff that I'm going to read tonight. But that was the thing that I grew up in, and I actually believed it fairly strongly up until about age 16 or 17 was when I really started to question and doubt my Christian worldview. So that's important to know. It's also important to know that my parents were abusive and in many ways emotionally, physically, which I'm going to talk about some tonight. Let's just do this overall disclaimer. This conversation and this podcast is going to have graphic moments. It's going to have content that, I don't know, I might get kicked off of Twitch for, so we might be relegated to just Facebook and YouTube going forward, but we'll see. No, I'm going to try to avoid that. But seriously, some of the stuff I'm going to talk about is pretty serious shit. So just know that going into it, and I will try to give many warnings for triggering moments later. But it's important that I talk about it because there's a lot of people struggling with this type of religious oppression and religious trauma, and they face the same thing I did, which is where people will deny it and try to pretend that it's not because of the religion. And I'm hoping tonight to show what that is. But this is also a story about just relationships between child and parent. And the times in our lives where fighting for ourselves, defending ourselves, having self-worth and self-respect sometimes means ending relationships and breaking contact. And it can be the best thing that you can do. And that's ultimately what happened to me on right around the third week of December, about a week and a half before Christmas, is I ended all contact with my own parents, which is something a lot of people have a hard time imagining ever doing. A lot of people can't imagine a relationship with your parents that's that bad. I'm going to do a lot of things that are going to honestly put my parents in a fairly negative light here. And I just want to stress the point of this is not to put my parents on blast. It's to help those who are in this situation see that somebody can stand up for themselves and is justified in doing so. Even if many people that they talk to disagree, or many people that they talk to think that they shouldn't do it, that they're obligated to love their parents and care for their parents. I want to show that you're absolutely not. You don't have to take abuse. You don't have to take having your identity denied, which is what happened with me. And you can stand up for yourself. So roughly 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, actually, my wife and I were in pretty dire straits financially. I guess it was just over 2 years ago, but 2 years and 2 months. And we ended up moving back in with my parents. Now, my wife had heard a lot of my stories. And as you can see in this text thread that's on screen, she is the wonderful, ravishing wifey. And she is wonderful. Because honestly, I don't think this would have happened without her support. But we moved back in with my parents to my reluctance, the people who have made my life a living hell for most of it. The people who have caused me the most trauma and the most stress and the most heartache. Because we had no choice. We were financially in a really, really bad spot. Now, after getting back on our feet, reestablishing our financial independence, getting back into the workflow of good jobs and a good situation, I've been mulling this decision over for quite some time to cut off my parents. It's been swirling around. But what happened on this particular day, which was December 9th, the text messages I'm about to read, really cemented it as the thing that needed to happen. So, without further ado, let's talk about what happened. My mom texts me on December 9th. Hi guys, yesterday David turned 70 years old, a retirement milestone. I forgot to remind you, but he said he didn't get any call or text from his son. Now, truth be told, this is where my mother fucked up. Because as you can see, she put that in a group text, and she included my lovely wife on that group text, who is always the first one to stand up for me. I mean, that's part of what makes her awesome. And the reason I say that that's where she fucked up is because, to be honest, after getting that, I probably would have just said, oh, that's my bad. I forgot. I was busy with work, whatever. I'll text him or I'll call him. But Micah was not having none of that. She said his son is incredibly stressed with work. And honestly, David doesn't call his grandchildren anytime they have a birthday or anything like that. Nobody answers a text. And frankly, David treats Alex like shit most days, including his birthday. So, and I followed up after seeing that with still waiting on a reply to my letter. So sorry if I lack sympathy here. Now, that letter was me making an attempt to put my entire heart and soul into reconciling things with my parents. I wrote a 7-page, what I consider to be a masterpiece of a letter. It's a perfect letter. It was really my best effort at trying to find common ground with people who disagreed with me about literally everything. And I put it all out there. And I wrote that letter clear back in like April or May or something like that. And my parents never bothered to reply to it. I just kept getting excuses. Oh, it's busy. It's tax time. Yeah, so it was April. Because my mom was like, it's tax season and I'm trying to get my taxes done for my business, yada, yada, yada. I could excuse that I'm too busy for a month, 2 months, not 7 months. So, my mom replied to that. A simple sorry would have sufficed. I am sorry your work is stressful. I thought you would love it. Sometimes my mom can't understand that some things you can love and they cause you stress, but that's okay. And I replied to her, I'm not sorry. Is he sorry he never calls the girls on their birthdays? Is he sorry for never getting back to me about my letter? Are you? Now, at this point, a reasonable, non-narcissistic person should be able to be self-critical enough to recognize that really the offense shoe should be on the other foot here, and that they have failed to be very kind or loving parents in this way. But that is not what I got, because my parents are narcissistic, and I'm going to talk about that. What I got was doubling down. She replied with this. If we could appreciate the good in people rather than the negative, our lives would change. For example, if you could remember the things your father did do, like taking you to the hospital when you were sick and being there when you were throwing up, supporting you financially in your emergencies, he may not love you the way you want him to, but he does the way he knows how. I can't even begin to describe how toxic. Thanks, Liam. Yeah, we're going to talk about my mom and calling me a person who believes I'm a false god here shortly, but that's don't get ahead of the game with the false god talk there, buddy. Liam knows too much. But imagine how toxic this is to say that. Supporting you financially in your emergencies, being there when you were sick, taking you to the hospital. Like, what father wouldn't do that? I mean, if you can't do that bare minimum, you shouldn't be a father. But whatever. He may not love you the way you want him to, but he does the way he knows how. I mean, that's literally a page out of the Narcissist Playbook. That's just unacceptable language. I came to terms with your dad that way some time ago, and it's resulted in me being happier, not happier, more complacent. Knowing he is always present, not a drinker, adulterer, or gambler. You know, the 3 worst things a person could be, apparently. I remember he worked 2 jobs when I was in a hospital bed for months and carried this family no matter what. He stayed and kept us fed and in a good home. You know how hard working 2 jobs and caring for our needs is, Alex. He is dependable if nothing else, and that is the only way he knows. Now, this follow-up text really pissed me off because my parents have held every yeah, right. The not as much of a jerk as he could have been award. Imagine celebrating this behavior. Unreal. So what really, really pissed me off about this particular piece is I have been working more or less more than 60 hours a week since I was really 18. When I was 18, I was working part-time at Radio Shack, full-time at Wells Fargo. I maintained 2 jobs, and then I started having kids when I was 20, went into as much full-time work to provide for my family as I could, and they have held every financial need I've ever had until now over my head, criticized every time I've ever had financial trouble as somehow a product of my own fault. They've blamed it on my separation from God because I'm atheist. They have told me that it's my fault that I'm in this financial trouble. And understand, I'm working literally since I think I've collected an entire grand total of 3 months of unemployment in my entire life. That wasn't seasonal unemployment from being a True Green salesperson. And that was only for 2 months of the year over the winter break, typically. So this is the criticism they threw at me. And it's like, why? what more can somebody do? All I ever tried to do was be a good father and raise my kids. So then to try and turn around and say, I know how hard that is, man, yeah, of course I do. My whole point is you all haven't been appreciating how hard I've worked because you always hold this shit over my head. That really made me mad. So I replied with, that just proves how much you don't even care what I've gone through these last 12 years. And this is where it got interesting, I think. Micah once again making the obvious point. These are the things he's supposed to do as a good as a father and a husband. You don't get rewarded for that. No shit. He should try caring about the things that Alex has to say, or I don't know, actually trying to learn a different way. Abusing your child for leaving the lights on is not love nor dependability, and paying the bills does not excuse it. I guess that would be hard to hear from someone who allowed the abuse in your fake God's name. Now, in a couple heated moments of passion, Micah and I have referred to my parents' deity of choice, Yahweh, as a fake God, which led to her accusing me of thinking that I'm a fake God, which is an old Christian doctrine that I will come back to a little bit later on. But just make note of that for now because it's kind of funny in the story. But my God, this woman went hard in the paint on my mom, and I love her for it. Because honestly, fair point. So the reference to abusing your child for leaving the lights on, growing up, I never appreciated how much this was clearly abuse, but one time, my dad actually beat me bare ass with his leather belt because I kept forgetting to shut lights off. He felt that was fair punishment to a 10-year-old child. And that was really, really, really fucked up looking back on it. And who knows the kind of effects it had on me. So, that's one of those deals. That's what that reference is. And then, my mother, once again, Liam, once again, tripled down this time. Have it your way. Bitterness is a killer. So this is what I replied. Mom, the saddest thing is not understanding the difference between self-respect and bitterness. You deserve better and have told yourself that security matters more than who you are as a person. I will never fall into that trap again. I have enough self-respect to demand fair treatment from others, and that includes the both of you. Since I've not gotten it, and since it's clear despite me writing a letter and making every attempt to show you both why you have disrespected me and refused to see it, I'm breaking all communication for good with both of you. This conversation made a tough decision really easy. I love you both, but I deserve better. Micah simply added, this includes me and the kids. I'm sorry it came to this, but I stand by my husband and I will not allow your brainwashing around our children anymore. Thank you for everything you've done for us, but do not contact us again. And my mom couldn't let it lie. She went on to say, so easy when you don't need us anymore. I'll send you the remaining amount you owe me. See, it's always about money with them, never about actually human connection. And then we can be done. No problem. Shellfish, but what the hell? Shellfish. You're so shellfish. Obviously, she meant selfish. It's funnier as shellfish, though, really, if you think about it. Micah was in full just popping off angry mode here. I'm not sure what part of do not contact us again you missed, but you don't do it. Alex does not owe you anything. I do. Respect your son's wishes to stop contacting him. I'll pay you back when I feel like it. The same way that you decide to show your love and be a Christian when it's convenient for me. Got him. BS. See, my parents only know how to show love and affection via monetary value, and since I don't return that, apparently I don't love them. I was mad for a different reason, so I started to pop off. I was mad because she dared to call this easy, and that's a big problem for me. So this is the text I wanted to really get to kind of open up this story, but I replied to her and I said, you know what's not easy? Navigating adulthood without emotional support from family and having to get your own family. So my mom was born to, that is you. You are the ravishing wifey. Hey, babe. Really as an adult, we moved 1,500 miles away from Massachusetts to Iowa. I never really had strong connection with most of my family in Massachusetts. My grandparents were all dead when we moved here for the most part. Really no connection and support. And so I've had to build that on my own. And then when you leave the church, like you lose that support and that group of people, and that's really challenging too. So that's what I'm referring to there. I had to get emotional support from people that actually cared about me as a person. I went on to say, what's not easy is being told by your parents that God had eternally judged you for being who you are. What's not easy is having to wrestle with the ethics of maintaining toxic relationships because you feel obligated. That's a reference to having to maintain a relationship with my parents, feeling like I was obligated. And the God eternally judging me bit comes from a bunch of stuff. The main things my parents were always most critical for me growing up was that I was sexually promiscuous by their definition. By most kids' standards, I was a prude, which is funny to me. I was into metal music, which is, that's the devil stuff. You can't like that. I was into things like magic cards and Pokemon, and all of that stuff was satanic, wizards and magic. You're not allowed to like wizards or magic. All this stuff my parents saw was evil because they were that orthodox, that like old school Christian. And this is what I mean by when a lot of people think the harms of religion come from, that just the worst stuff that you hear about on TV, the wars, the suicide bombings, and the genital mutilation and that kind of thing. Until you've experienced being robbed of the things that bring you joy, it's really hard to understand. And even Micah, whom I love very much, even for her, it was really hard to appreciate and understand it until she lived with them with me. Yeah, perfect. Not allowed to read Twilight. And it's always hypocritical too. It's so confusing because my parents were totally fine with Lord of the Rings because somehow Gandalf is an allegory for Jesus because he dies and comes back again, but he comes back as more badass or something. I don't know. I don't know what the justification is, but Harry Potter was it's witchcraft. Can't like Harry Potter. You will actually poison your mind with Harry Potter. They never stopped to think rationally even for a second. Like the fact that literally like 1 billion kids have probably watched or read Harry Potter in some fashion. Turns out they're not all doing a seance trying to summon the devil right now. But they don't think like that. I went on to say, what's not easy is having everything you ever enjoyed or loved being called sin based on made up bullshit. Whether it was magic and Pokemon or kissing a girl or metal music, the things that I knew to be absolutely fine, you tried to poison my mind and ruin me and hold me back from the great man I would become. This is where I got accused of being a fake god, or I think I'm a fake god, I think. I said, you tried to tell me that car accidents were my fault based on, quote, spiritual problems. I spent 10 years convinced I was going to hell because I was raped by a fucking boy and thought it was consensual. That's tough. Again, I was trying to draw the contrast of just how tough my life was when she's trying to say, oh, everything's so easy when you don't need us anymore. And she's referencing financially or for a place to stay. Now, just to clarify my point here, and I've talked about this on my own personal YouTube. When I was about 11, I had a secular boy who was 3.5 or 4 years older than me who lived down the street. And he used various forms of coercion and bribes to convince me to do sexual favors and sex acts with him. And I believed I was agreeing to that consensually. What I didn't realize is he had a lot of power over me in that scenario because he had the secular video games and the music and the Disturbed CDs and the stuff that I wasn't allowed to have at home that was contraband at my house. And I wanted to borrow it. I wanted to listen to it. I wanted to get to play with those things. And as time went on, he knew that I craved that stuff. And he knew me and my family fairly well. And he used that against me. And eventually it got to the point where he told me one time that if I didn't do certain things for him that I can't say on live stream, but you can assume it's as bad as it gets, that he would tell my parents that I was the gay F word. And so it wasn't until I actually became educated about sex and consent and these things when I was older, outside of a biblical context, that I even understood what had happened to me. I was raped. And I didn't know it literally because of religion. And that's fucked up. And my parents could never understand what I even mean by any of this. I'm fairly certain. So I went on to say, the thing is, I've grown beyond you in every way, in ways that you were blind to, and it's sad. I've become a better father than either of you ever were a parent. I've built and repaired some of the best relationships in my life. I'm intellectually brilliant, wildly successful in my professional career. And I did that all on my own. No big brother sky daddy to thank. That was through my fucking hard work, determinism, and grit against the odds of one of the most stifling childhoods anyone's ever had to go through. You think any of this was easy? You think re-educating myself from the ground up was easy? You are confused. My 20s were impossible. It's a miracle I never took my own life because of the bullshit I was fed out growing up. You have no idea how easy you have it. Now again, until you're ready to actually care about what I have to say and my experience, which I'm convinced will be never, I don't want to fucking hear from you. And the money, consider it fair compensation for the therapy I've had to never get while I worked 70 hours just to provide for your fucking grandkids. Goodbye. I'm sorry, children, that I used fucking ahead of your name. I was real mad, and it was in the heat of a text. Someday they'll watch this, probably. They're not watching now. I'm fairly certain. I hope, anyway. That's where this text thread ended. Fortunately, that particular wall of text was enough to get my mom to realize, not okay. She backed off, whatever. She stopped replying to me. Now, the incredible thing is, I made it clear that I really wanted them to read my letter. My parents have a really bad habit of ignoring my serious communication with them. Thanks, Liam. I try. Always appreciate your support. Honestly, it's been a wild ride. Now, when I told them that I really had this letter I wanted them to respond to, hilariously, they did finally try to. This is from Gmail, from my Gmail account, okay? What they ended up doing, and I'm sure what my dad did was search emails for me. He didn't bother to check, like, the date or anything like that, because what he did was he replied to an email from literally 4 years ago that was not the new letter that I actually wrote. And this email was fully of emotion and honestly a little bit of sneakiness by me. I thought maybe the best way to approach my parents was to try and do it within the context of their religion rather than to get them to understand me as a non-religious person. So that's what I attempted to do. I said, "Dear Mom and Dad, I forgive you, I accept you, I love you." Colossians 3:13 tells us to forgive another as God forgave you. It's a very strong commandment. The verse before it's equally important about clothing yourself in kindness, gentleness, compassion, humility, patience. I was trying to remind them of all the good values they're supposed to believe in and care about me. I quoted more scriptures that I don't want to give any more attention to than that. But I wanted to start laying the groundwork for why I no longer believed the way they wanted me to. And so this is what this email was. Now, everything in bold here, like this piece, is what my dad said in response to this email. Okay? And I can tell it's my dad based on the language in it. It's also, my parents are very traditionally Christian. They're very patriarchal. Father handles these kinds of moments. Because private conversation, mom's a pushover, you know. She'll be led astray by the devil's distractions or whatever. I don't know. They have some bullshit excuse for everything of why women can't do anything on their own. But just even the way it's written, I can tell is what my dad's response is. So I'm just going to go through this because I think my dad's responses really reveal how religion can be a shield for abuse and trauma-inducing statements and a lot of negativity and all kinds of other stuff. And it also can be the fuel for narcissism. And I mean real narcissism. The inability to care for others and their experience. And to only care about one's own experience. So this was what this old email, which does not represent how I think or feel now, but I mean, it was how I felt at the time 4 years ago. I said several things fundamentally bothered me with the way I practice my faith. And take it from someone who has ran the gambit on what I believe and waged internal war as to whether or not I could believe in a God such as the Bible described. The key component of love is sacrifice. I actually don't believe that anymore. That's what I was always taught until I wasn't. I saw love as accepting that sometimes people did bad things, even repeatedly. In fact, most often people repeatedly say the same mistakes over and over. But God forgives and accepts them, and so should we. And I do actually agree with that piece of it. I do think people do make the same mistakes over and over again. And that's not a reason to abandon them. It's not a reason to stop loving them. It's a reason to you know, if those mistakes are harming you, to put yourself at a distance to where you can no longer be harmed by it. But you can do that and still love that person and care for them. My dad replied in all bold here, God forgives his children, believers. You see, he has to put believers in parentheses. And why do you think that is? It's to put me outside the scope of whom God can forgive. God doesn't forgive me. No, not the atheist. When they repent for the sin, and he never remembers it, and it is as far as the east is from the west. And God forgives unbelievers when they come to his son Jesus, becoming born again, a new creation in Christ. It is us that keep bringing it up to our detriment. Seriously? That's your response to this? Your response is basically, you're not in the fucking club? And this blew my mind. I knew from that, I was like, why have I ever even bothered tried talking to these people? But anyways, it goes on. I went on to say, you see, I had a father that had a serious anger problem and let it cause him to treat others that normally loved and cared about him badly sometimes. I forgive you for this, Dad. I was referring to the beatings and the time he backhanded me and all of the times of everything else. I had a mother who at one point left me with him, and I resented you for the time you were gone. I resented you both for the hostility and hate in our house. I forgive you both. I didn't ever feel like you put me first or made personal sacrifices to encourage me, learn about me, teach me. I'm just now learning out how to change the brakes on my car. Most often I felt I didn't understand these handy things Dad could have taught me because he didn't trust me to help with jobs around the house. That's still a trauma I live with all the time now. And that has nothing to do with religion. It's just how my dad is. Just, he was so obsessed with money that if I ever broke anything or fucked anything up, it was, I was just dismissed or scoffed at or yelled at. I went on to say I often felt like I was more of an inconvenience and my mistakes were unacceptable. I felt blamed for many of the problems at home. I'm sorry you felt that way, and we're not sure why you would perceive that. Not, I want to understand why you feel that way. Just, the dismissal is so narcissistic here. I went on to say, blamed for my anger, blamed for my disobedience. I often wonder what excuse you gave yourselves for taking yourselves out of the blame equation for my behavior. Well, don't worry. Mom and Dad have an answer for you. Alex, our behavior, no matter what that behavior is and is initiated by, is our choice. When someone, for example, cuts us off with their car, we can respond with anger to the point of road rage, or we can have self-control and not respond that way. Somebody said to me once that if people push your buttons, go buttonless. You see, my behavior at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 can't possibly be a product. It's just my free will. Couldn't possibly be a product of the environment I was raised in, right? This is part of one of the big problems with the belief in free will. It's like, when does someone start to have it? Would you hold a 3-year-old child responsible for their behavior? Would you go, hey, don't, eat that thing on the floor. You're bad? No, you just know it's being a 3-year-old. And the truth is, I was doing the same thing any other 12-year-old or 15-year-old or 11 or 10-year-old would have done in the environment that I was in, lashing out the way I did, because I was being robbed of the basic things that make life worth living. Expressing myself, expressing my identity was being stripped from me every single fucking day. Of course I was going to lash out and get angry. But they take no responsibility for it, and it's obvious right here. It was my free will. I could have just made choices to be less angry and not, punch holes in the wall or break stuff. Okay, whatever. I went on to say I was working jobs and leaving me with other caretakers all the time. Part of my behavior issues was it the fact that I was raised without a father until I was 6. You let me sit in the basement and play video games for hours on end, and when I started to struggle, when I got into high school, you simply got angry with me, said it was on me, that I had to do the work, and that was all there was. I was too much to handle, too much to deal with. You were the parents. It was your job to teach and shape me, and no one else's. They can't handle that because they don't want to be self-critical. I went on to explain, you see, a cognitive dissonance existed for me in my whole life that was genuinely painful. I spent nights in agony fighting over things in my mind that I didn't agree with each other. If I believe this, then how could I be capable of doing something that goes against that belief? I'll give you some examples of this dissonance, but I want you to try and solve a very simple one. How am I to hate what is evil, as Romans 12:9 asks, if I'm to follow this overwhelming commandment to forgive, love, to be patient, and love my enemies, the non-believers, the evildoers? And my dad is clearly actually caught up in his response here a little bit, because he realizes, oh shit, I'm not really living what I claim to be. Okay, I can understand this. Jesus said on the cross, out of love, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. God loves the person but hates the sin because it's destructive to them. I can love the person who is weak and help them correct this behavior, and yet I'm not condemning them. So I think there's a little bit of an admission there by my father. I went on to say, this didn't sit well with me. Romans 14:1, as I listed above, says that we should accept those weak in faith and not quarrel over disputable matters. I believe that God is possible. I just don't absolutely believe that he's there completely. I have reasonable doubt. Does this make me weak in faith? My dad goes on to say, no, it does not. We were weak in faith in our understanding also, which is why we did not walk in truth. We were under teachers who did not teach us the gospel of Jesus, but another gospel. I don't even know what the hell that even means. However, you need to understand that to every man is given the measure of faith, Romans 12:3, an equal amount to all. What we all deal with is walking in that faith and the spirit battling with the flesh and the flesh battling with the spirit, which is why sometimes we make wrong choices. That is the most ridiculous word salad I've ever read, to basically just ignore the fact that I'm saying I don't think a God exists, because he can't actually deal with that. God is so essential to my father's worldview that it's just, he can't even deal with that. So I went on to say, I absolutely believe that until conditions change, if I jump up, I will come down. I believe in gravity. I believe that if more people would practice love and compassion, the world would be a better place, regardless of what religion they follow. And I believe that a creator could have created the universe, just not the way it was described in the Bible, by people who had a tiny fraction of the knowledge and advanced mind that we do in the 21st century. The Bible commands in that verse that we are not to quarrel over disputable matters. That doesn't mean you get to just ignore my opinion and what I think because what you think is more important or more right. It means you don't make it a fight about my view, but I feel like that's what you've done your whole life. No, son, your mother and I tried to guide you in the choices that made the best we knew how, and not agreeing with your opinion is not ignoring your opinion. Well, I mean, at bottom, that's true, but they do ignore my opinion. And this is my problem, is they can't take responsibility. They can't stand a conversation with this without getting angry at me or dismissive of me for more than 5 minutes. I mean, we just can't talk about any of this shit, which is part of why I had to write a new letter several years after this email that my dad replied to this month, thinking that it was the letter I was talking about. So the rest of this is so much. You know what? It's all worth it. That's the point of the podcast. We're going to talk about all of it. I wanted to say that's what that chapter is talking about later when it says one day is more sacred to others, where to some every day is the same. It doesn't matter what you think about what I think or if they disagree, because we all will stand before the Lord someday. If I have some catastrophically false understanding of this, please explain it to me, because the way I read it, it's not an issue that you need to be concerned with. So in all caps, my dad tells me what the problem is. Or not all caps, but in bold. The Jewish converts caution against judging, and Gentile believers against despising one another. Paul was correcting their behavior. See, it's only Paul correcting their behavior at that time, but my dad, who's the new all-seeing apostle of God, who has, direct line to the big man upstairs, does have every right to judge me. He is the arbiter of God's truth here on earth now. When Paul was saying that back then, that was just to those specific people. That's what my dad's trying to say with that. I went on to say, nor is how I engage in relationships, recreational activities, social environments, my work life. You care about my life, and I do believe that, but you could care less if I'm happy or fulfilled or feel supported. Alex, we care about you all the time, which is why we tried to help guide you in your choices when you were growing up. No, you tried to shape me and tell me what to do and hope that that carried over into my adult life. That is not supportive in any way. I went on to say, all the monetary help in the world could never amount to actually feeling like I'm paid attention to. Actually feel like you really care if I'm enjoying the things that matter to me. Every time I talk about my book, I was at the time trying to write a book, or the positive impact I'm making on my friends' lives, or the new video games, or the music, or the beautiful, magnificent portrayals of humanity I see in the world, you guys could care freaking less. It's so uninteresting to you because you view 90% of it as sinful. We're not sure where you came up with the idea. We never said that or implied in any way. So, it's just, honestly, more and more gaslighting here, of telling me that my experience was not my actual experience, but that's okay. Whatever. But the big thing here is I don't feel like you are. I don't see how only hanging out with other pastors and other people who only ever talk about God all day is advancing any kingdom. You go and you pray for believers. You do nothing for non-believers. You don't take time to reach anyone who believes different than you, because you tell them that from minute one that if they don't accept your way of life and your view and then their lifestyle, their reality that they have lived their whole life has to change in an instant. Then because you said those magic words, I believe in God the Father, all your sins are forgiven, and you go back to doing those things day in, day out, feeling exceptional. You feel like you're doing so much for God while other people suffer in their lives. Instead of showing them compassion, patience, kindness, and love, you blame their destruction on themselves. That part I actually do still agree with, because that's what my parents still do to this day. They blame it on sinful, evil ways. Anything bad that happens to somebody, it's because of sin. Anything good that happens to them, God did it. It's the most bullshit dichotomy. It's like good stuff, God, bad stuff, you're evil. You chalk it up to their lack of God as to why they suffer and ignore them. I can think of nothing that goes against the scriptures up above more. There's no patience when you give someone maximum time frame to accept God before you write them off. And then this happens. Alex, first, our walk in Christ is not for you to judge. Really? Because everything I do is for you to judge, Dad. Unreal. We are still growing in Christ, and God will judge us based on whether we built our house on a rock or on sand so it would crumble. Second, so you don't have any idea what we're doing to help people. Part of what we're called to do is disciple believers as well as leading people to Christ, healing the sick, feeding the widows and orphans. See, my parents are faith healing ministers. They think that their prayers are directly responsible for people being healed of ailments. Problem with that being, they often tell people to rely on God rather than doctors. There's real harm in what they do. And it bothers me. And it's bothering me more and more all the time, which is part of why it ultimately resulted in me cutting them off. Now, this is the funny part. In the midst of replying to all this, he didn't notice that this letter was this old. I literally said in the letter, I'm only 26 and you don't make me feel like I'm even lovable or acceptable because of how I live my life. We can't make you feel loved based on your expectations by our actions, because if we don't meet your expectations as far as you are concerned, we don't love you. The bottom line is we love you despite what you might think. We gave you a place to live till you got back on your feet because we love you. You see, love means money, compensation. Love doesn't mean loving me, the person, because my identity has been rejected. My identity is outside of God's will and outside of God's protection. Therefore, they can love the body that is Alex, their son, simply by just doing the minimum obligation that parents should do for kids, and they think that that passes as love. Because the flip side is, the truth is, they don't think I love them because I am atheist. I went on to say, because part of it includes not accepting God, even though for most of my life I did, but you still thought I was awful, you still rejected me, and never forgave my mistakes. We never held anything against you and forgave you for all the wrong choices you made, whether you believe it or not. Well, who would believe it? You all are reading this letter right now. They literally have held stuff against me at multiple points in this fucking letter they replied to. It's unreal. I can't even... It's honestly crazy going back to read this. I had so much guilt my whole life, and I hold you both responsible. I've always felt like maybe the fifth priority in your life after God, church affairs, careers, TV, and housework. When my emotional well-being was at its worst points, I had to fix it and face it largely on my own. I had to face these actions I kept feeling compelled to do that were considered sinful with no help, no support, because I felt chastised. You convinced me the reason I was struggling in school and kept getting into trouble was because I had Pokemon hidden in my room. We never believed it was Pokemon causing the problems, though we didn't believe it was a good influence for you. We may not have been perfect parents and not necessarily made the right choices in raising you, but your issues stemmed from not making right choices also. What a beautiful gaslight that is, right? Oh, well, we didn't actually think it was the Pokemon. Really? Because you threw all my shit away and made me stop playing it and told me it was banned in the house. And if I ever got caught watching it, I got grounded. So what? Okay. I went on to say, the most innocent game in history, meanwhile, had no problem letting me play Medal of Honor, battle tanks, watching James Bond movies. The endless string of hypocrisy made me feel awful. I didn't know what to believe. There was not one real plausible, reasonable explanation as to why Pokemon was evil, but all of those other games weren't. Wizards are acceptable in Lord of the Rings universe, but they're evil in Harry Potter. And Star Wars, they have a completely different religion that's about some mystical thing called the Force, and that was okay, but Magic the Gathering was bad because it was made by, quote, Wizards of the Coast. You told me you couldn't love God and Metallica. You told me you can't love others when they live sinful lives. Nope, never said that, because we're commanded to love no matter what a person said. Jesus loved all, no matter the sin or not, which is one of the reasons he went to the cross. That's actually true unless you're gay, in which case my parents don't love you, just so you know. But we all live sinful lives, I tried to tell them. And here we go. You ready for the ultimate narcissism card, folks? No, we don't. I know you may not believe this or understand this, but we have been made the righteous of God in Christ. And yes, we may sin from time to time, but we have an advocate for forgiveness in 2 Corinthians, Romans. I said, it's impossible to be without sin. No, Jesus the man never sinned, which means as a man, we should strive to not sin and walk in the righteousness we were given at the new birth. I went on to say, you guys just place more punishment, more judgment on some sin than others. No, we don't. We treat all sin the same. Mom, the other day, you called me a glutton. Again, they don't remember this because it was 4 years ago. She said she never called you a glutton, and I never heard her say that to me. Yeah, that's because I wrote this when I was 26. That happened 4 years ago. I don't expect her to remember the one time she called me a glutton because I've gained weight as an adult. How dare I?
Oh my God.
Said I treat women badly. Yet for once in your life, have either of you ever even for a second considered how badly you have treated your son? You've largely ignored me and written me off, acted as if I'm one of your problem because I'm different, more of a problem because I'm self-destructive in your eyes. You hold me responsible for things that happened when I was 11, long before I had an understanding and perspective of my actions and the scope of what I was doing. Alex, we don't hold anything against you for your lapses in judgment or choices that you made at all, let alone when you were 11. I'm not sure where you're getting that from. Everything else you say. Like, what do you mean? You accuse me of treating women poorly, being unfaithful, and for most of my life, being lazy. I've worked constantly since I turned 18. And actually, you know what? After all this terrible stuff my dad says in here, you have actually worked hard since age 14 and bought a car while in school. Thank you for that acknowledgement of my hard work. I appreciate it, Dad. So one compliment in this whole fucking... Anyways. And you're critical of my decision-making and lack of self-discipline, and take no responsibility for not training me and making me feel like I had a safe place at home. Why wouldn't I have moved out at 18 years old? I had two parents who hated me because I'm a collection of beliefs, interests, and values that you despise and criticize 90% of them. This is the worst thing I think they say in this whole letter. I think you're projecting here. You had two parents who love you and dealt with your destructive behavior that did damage to our homes and people the best we knew how. What about the damage you did to this people? What about the anger and damage you did to me that you've not acknowledged once in this entire letter? I'm pouring my heart out. Not one admission of fault. Not one acceptance of the behavior. Not one acknowledgement. This is the kind of stuff that you should never tolerate in your life. Ever. And when people tell me, like, how could you have a relationship that's this bad with your parents to the point where you need to cut them off? On the outside, they look like amazing people, right? They're those church people who are donating money and doing charity work and doing all this stuff. On the outside, looking in, people look at them and they think, the weights, they're so nice. Does this sound nice to anybody? I don't know if I've lost my chat because I haven't seen it move at all, but if you guys are out there and you're hearing this still, I mean, this is literally nuts. Food's here. Hell yeah. Then my dad, once again, failing to appreciate my experience at all, goes on to say, I had a rough upbringing with an alcoholic mother and father who, the most part, absent, which caused me to make poor choices. Which caused you to make poor choices? I didn't blame them for my poor choices because I could have made the choice to choose differently. This is the problem with the Christian view of free will. This is why I talked about this in my free will episode, which I would encourage you to go back and look at. This is what's so toxic about this belief. You're acknowledging that your bad upbringing and the negative, angry, alcoholic mother and father, absentee father, caused you to make poor choices, but then you turn around in the next sentence and be like, yeah, but I could have done better. What? So everyone just gets a responsibility for how they raise their kids? We just give them all a pass? This makes no sense. It's not even well thought out. Oh, that's so funny. Seriously, your food just got there too? That's funny. So I went on to say, I'm proud of myself for this part. I've done a really good job of figuring it out on my own, and I've finally forgiven you. I still don't like to be at home. I feel constantly judged and unwelcome just for existing, which I'm sure is how any sinner feels sitting in your pews at church too. I'm only writing this because I think that you guys... What's up? Oh, I gotta open stuffs. Hold on, guys. No, you're fine.
Do you want pizza now or do you
I'll
want to wait?
I'm only writing this because I think that you guys owe it to yourselves to self-examine your priorities, self-examine what love really is and what compassion really is and what it's like to show someone real kindness, patience. For compassion to be real, it must be a sacrifice. Now, again, I don't agree with this point anymore. I was still developing a lot of my thoughts and beliefs, and they change all the time. I think sacrifice is a really bad term. I do, however, think that love is something you have to just give. And if there's an expectation of return, it's not the best form of love, is what I would say. We'll just say that. Is that funny to you?
Yeah.
For compassion to be real, it must be a sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice to have your son sleep on your basement floor and ask him to pay to do it. It's not compassion to ask others to raise money for a van for a pastor who shares your vision and who did something back for you. Love and compassion require sacrifice, and the best one we can ever make is time. I dare you to spend actual time listening to someone who thinks differently than you, actual time caring for someone who means nothing to you, actual time doing something that isn't about David and Christine. I work 70-hour work weeks, and some days all I want to do is sleep, but when a friend is feeling down or depressed, I push through and I make time. I really listen to them. I put my phone down and I hear them out. I don't judge them. I ask them why they feel the way they do and how they came to the conclusions and thoughts that they did. I don't ask them to conform to what I believe or what they should have done or what God thinks or what anyone else in society thinks. I ask them because I genuinely care. And I often disagree in what I do tell them, but I also get heard because I had the heart to listen first. That part that's amazing is these are all things I learned from you guys, things you taught me. Speak last, listen first. Great leaders show compassion, kindness, and love to all. Forgiveness is all things I got from you and God and my upbringing. I just don't see it in you all the time. You are so great at showing it to people who have some perceived need like a prayer in a hospital, but you'll never know how much I needed it. Your very own son. Needed it facing a divorce. The world at 18 years old. Needed it when I was 15 and thrust into a whole new culture in Iowa. And you were busy. Busy judging me and not listening. I don't think you realize how often I get less than 10 words into a sentence you don't agree with, and you start sighing, rolling your eyes, and judging me. You don't ever care about the man behind the idea or where any of it came from. And there's nothing that shows more of a lack of compassion. Look up the antonym to compassion. It's indifference. Study that. And think if you've ever shown me indifference, shown a general lack of interest in me, your son. I'll say it again. I've forgiven you both. I know that you were taught these things and believe the way you do as strongly as I believe the way I do. I will listen to why and ask you how, and I'll compare notes with my why and my hows anytime. I love you. And then my dad did this. Alex, you say a number of times in this letter to parents that you've forgiven us for what we have done, but I seriously doubt you've truly forgiven us or yourself. For if you did, we would most likely not be where we are now with bringing up all these issues. We see issues differently in our family, just like when 3 people witness an auto crash and the cops get 3 different descriptions of the crash, yet it's the same crash. Gaslighting. Gaslighting 101, actually. My dad's giving a fucking introductory course here. God says he doesn't remember our sins, and they are as far as the east from the west when we repent. I'm not sure what triggered this, whether it was us forgetting the girls' birthdays or what it was. What triggered it was, I don't even remember. I was like 26. You responded to the wrong shit. I apologize for that, but in the past, you've always told us when there was a party for their birthday, we should have had them in our calendar so we wouldn't miss them. We are all the outcome of our choices in life, whether good or bad.
You can show up late or not show up at all.
Right? Yeah. And as a born-again person, we struggle to be moved by our spirit, by our flesh, which is why the fruits of the Spirit reside in our spirit, so we may learn to walk in them and not be controlled by our flesh or emotions. Alex, this is the Greek translation of Galatians. I know you don't believe anymore, but if God is real and created us, which I'm convinced of, okay, let's talk about it. He gave us a manual with how to use what he gave us. And then he quotes a bunch of scriptures. All right. So that was the actual reply to the wrong thing from my parents. And I wanted to get through all that just to show you how my parents talked to me and put that evidence out there. That was a lot of words and a lot to cover. So I'm going to take a quick break. Put the stream beats back on for a minute. I will be back in probably like 5 or 6 minutes. And I want to go through the letter I actually wrote that I think is a perfect letter. And I want to talk about how I feel about it. And the things that could be done to reconcile even some of the worst relationships. Because if I could have reconciled this with my parents, I want to. And it is still my hope that they read this and that there's some hope there. Some chance. But if they don't, I'm going to talk about what I'm prepared to do for the rest of my life. And put it out here publicly in front of everyone. And encourage, if you are being treated this badly, to consider doing the same if it's the best way to protect yourself. But like I said, let me go on a quick break here. And I will be right back. All right. Fade the music out. Just got some pizza from Scornavacas. They don't sponsor the show, but I'm trying to get them to because their food's dope. Wouldn't that be funny? If I just ate a certain food every week on the stream till they sponsored me. If only. So that's the story so far.
Oh my god, I'm dying.
My parents are expert victim blamers. The reason they're victim blamers is because the fundamental core dogma of Christianity is we are to be blamed for how we are influenced and how we act and according to others. It's Eve's fault she listened to the really cunning snake. That's the original sin. The core dogma of Christianity is original sin. It's that we're all sinners from day one, because apparently if you listen to something somebody else tells you that seems like it's going to be good for you, you're to blame for not listening to the right voice. Everything in Christianity follows from that. It is if you actually follow the moral doctrine, the moral side of this, which I would encourage you to have another episode about how religion makes people less moral. I explain this in kind of further detail. This is a terrible method for determining a moral framework that actually holds people responsible for their behavior. And as you can see, my parents aren't responsible for their behavior. They found every way in that letter, in that email, I should say, to be not morally responsible. Now, I do think there is common ground. I do think that there's hope. I think there's a way around this. And I think that it's possible to reconcile it. But to do so, and to do so in any strong conflict, what you have to do is you really have to break things down to the most basic areas of agreement. Like the most basic. Like reality exists, all right? That's step one. What's next? I think, therefore I am. Okay, I'm conscious. Something seems to be happening. Okay, what's next? And you got to go from there and figure out at what point your point of disagreement is. How basic of a disagreement do we have? Now, fortunately, I actually am fairly confident that my parents and I agree on some things. So I wrote this, and I think it's a perfect letter. And I want to read it, if nothing else, because they're not going to appreciate it, so maybe you guys will. Yeah, I'm just going to read it. Dear Mom and Dad, I wanted to write to you both to try and communicate better than I have lately. Certainly better than I did in that last email, because I was clearly pissed off. The purpose of this letter is not to change your beliefs about God, politics, morals, parenting, or any other topic we have disagreed on lately. I'm writing this based on the idea that I believe both of you love me as your son as I love you. I am writing to change your opinion of me and the things I believe about those types of topics. I'm doing so because I hurt, and I'm hoping by reading this we can undo some of that hurt together, as you may not even really know it's there. I want you to understand me better so that we can have a more loving relationship. You'll have to trust that these are my intentions to read on, but I really hope that you do. The first key to a good olive branch is try to establish a conversation in good faith, that we're both approaching this because of a mutual love or a mutual goal or at minimum mutual respect. I'm extending this olive branch, but also I was honest and upfront. I want to change their opinion of me. And if at the end of this letter their opinion of me is unchanged, then we're done, is basically the idea here. Once again, I wrote this back in like March, April timeframe. I wrote it over a period of a few weeks, kept polishing it, doing that kind of thing. I went on to say, by the time you're reading this, it has gone through dozens of hours of thoughts and revisions and changes that I've tried to outline my thinking as clearly as possible. I share two discordant beliefs that have made this very difficult to write. First, I think it may be the case that the distance between us as ideologically has become too great for civil discussion. And on the other hand, I think there is still something worth salvaging. It's become clear, either way, that this type of thinking is not possible to share with you in real time and should only be done in written form. I actually believe there is more common ground than both of you might think between us, as is often the case with people generally. Lately, I've often repeated a bit of a catchphrase: America is only divided on your TV screen. If you go out your front door, you find most of us are an awful lot more neighborly than we're being told, or rather, sold. I think the same must be true of us as a family. To me, that starts with some key areas of agreement, and I'd like to lay those out. So right in the beginning of this, I'm trying to lay out where we agree. I think we share most of the same values. Jordan Peterson often talks in his books, Maps of Meaning, and whenever he speaks about man's hierarchical nature. I think it's undeniably wired into us as a species, regardless of our origins, that we maintain hierarchies as part of our biology. This is why, as humans, we love top 10 lists and tier lists and organize our corporate structures in certain ways, etc. Peterson and I disagree about a lot, but one thing I think he's dead on about is that we humans have a hierarchy of values. I highly value my health, but I also value a chocolate bar. Those things are at odds with each other, and the only way we can organize them or to make sense of them is by placing them at differing points in this hierarchy of values. Let me share where I think you will find that we have a great deal of agreement. Again, I'm trying to get back to what do we agree on so we can address where the disagreement begins, and I'm also trying to draw them back to a good faith appreciation of me as a thinker, me as a person. The first value for all of us is truth. I capitalize it because I don't mean simple truth. I mean like big truth. This is the kind of truth that keeps our grips on reality. We all put truth as supreme because it's the foundational blocks that the rest of the values rely on. Truth has several tools for us to help obtain it. These are logic, the ability to reason, the sciences, the spiritual experience, skepticism, and sensory experience. Another place I think we would agree is that these tools can be too dull or sharp, and that's what can cause us to be misled or deceived. Tune your skepticism too high, and you will find yourself paranoid and delusional. Turn your spiritual experience too high, and you will wind up in the Andes high on DMT and think that a hallucinogenic experience is more true than reality. This is the core value I'll always come back and appeal to, because on this, we agree. And I think everyone agrees that. I don't know what's more important than truth. The world truly makes no sense if truth is not the most important value. This is part of why the number one thing we hate in relationships is being deceived. At some point, if you think I'm wrong, I'd love to hear why. Throw it out there. The next value I think we both put as paramount is the moral one, which is to say goodness and all its contents. This is fairness and justice and self-improvement and love and kindness, etc. I think these things are supreme to all other secondary values. While we probably disagree on some of the contents of goodness and how to get it, we both value it just below or equal to truth in our hierarchy. This is why it's worthy of discussion at all. It's precisely because this is so valuable to me that I can't just walk away from the conversation. If it didn't have such a high value of truth and moral goodness, we truly have nothing worth discussing between us. That's also why the risk of offense is so high, and caution must be taken to avoid that problem, which is why I was putting this in a letter. This doesn't mean that I don't have a lot of respect for your pursuit of bettering yourselves based on these values. You might do that through your relationship with God and through Scripture or through the ministry. I take a different route, but the pursuit is of the same ends. There's clearly a difference between pursuing a higher state of being and one of the truly degenerate people who we see sometimes in the world. And I hope you recognize that pursuit in me as I see it in both of you. Once again, I'm trying to show that I do recognize their value. And that is all true. That's from the bottom of my heart. My parents are genuinely trying to do the best thing. When you believe that the Bible is the perfect word of the creator of the universe, when you believe that down to your toes, reading the Bible and trying to do what it says best you can makes a lot of sense. It's the only thing you should do. It's the only thing any of us should be doing, if it's true. Which is why I always say, I don't care at all what religion does for you or how it makes your life better. The only thing that should matter is it true? Because if it's all a lie, you should throw the books in the garbage can. But obviously I'm not going to say that to them at this point. I'm trying to find where we agree here still. I went on to say the third value below those other two is absolute well-being. Now, part of what my belief of morality is that a right action is one that actually helps conscious creatures acquire more well-being. And that's what makes an action right. Is things that raise the well-being of conscious creatures. But there's also times where I value my own well-being, and I think we can recognize that it's wrong to value our own well-being over that of others. And that's why I think that morality is slightly higher than our own personal well-being. And this is where sacrifice comes in. This is where jumping in front of the train to save the other person comes in. This is where understanding why it's not okay to just like go take people's shit and, you know, like be horrible just so that you can survive. Like we all recoil at that a little bit. And that's because we know that doing the right thing is more important than our own well-being. I think that's really innate to non-psychopathic or sociopathic minds. I think it's a kind of an instilled value in us. So anyways, the third value below the other two is absolute well-being. This is, again, something we all want for ourselves and each other, and the only time we change our minds on that is when someone violates the previous two. That's why it's below them on the hierarchy. I will die for a good cause or defending the truth. There isn't anything else I'd sacrifice my own well-being for. If we can agree on these three values, we can have complex conversations about greatly discordant topics. Atheism versus theism, ethical systems, politics, socialism versus capitalism, and many other potentially incendiary topics. If we agree, firstly, that we're both working towards a project of obtaining absolute truth, followed by absolute goodness. I've been talking a lot tonight. Followed by absolute well-being, then we can disagree and work out the details because we've agreed to a common goal. I truly believe that if we as a species always come back to these three values and agree on them, we can always choose conversation over violence in any disagreement. Now, I said that specifically because there are only two ways out of any conflict: conversation or violence. That really is it. And if you want conversation to win out instead of violence, you have to have a framework for that. And you have to have an agreed set of values. The reason why I can't overcome a conflict with a psychopath, thank you, Essie. I love you too. The rest of this will be on YouTube in its full recording tomorrow if you want to catch the rest of it. Thanks for your support. It means a lot. I can use this framework to solve any disagreement with conversation rather than violence with anybody who's not psychopathic, anybody who has a well-functioning mind. If we can come back to these goals and demonstrate to each other where we're not actually pursuing our own goals, not my goals, and I'm trying to get you to pursue my goal. If these are all our shared goals, they should resolve any conflicts. We probably just disagree on the details of how we're getting there. So we can have that conversation. We can avoid violence. And that's really important to me. So that's why I said that. We can always choose conversation over violence in any disagreement. We can discuss anything with this structure and try to achieve our common goals. This also relates to why we should talk about these things. If I can assume that you value truth and goodness and well-being, then it follows that having a higher state of well-being requires you to get closer to what is good and what is true in your behavior and thoughts and actions. If I see something that you're doing is clearly wrong, clearly bad, or that something you believe in is clearly untrue, then I have a responsibility to try and show you how I see it. And doing so, I increase all three values for both of us. And of course, this works vice versa as well. I'm giving credit to the things that they want to teach me and tell me. Because it's important to give credit. Even if it feels bad. Because it did feel bad. But I wanted to write a perfect letter. And I think I did. The reason I wanted to point out those three values first and establish common goal and common ground is so that I tell you where I think I identified our fundamental problem. In debate or contested conversation, it's considered an imperative that the two disagreeing sides argue in, quote, good faith. Honesty and sincerity of intention are critical to understanding each other's points and having any chance of agreement. You have to believe that both sides have this goal, that their intent is to seek truth. In the two sides of the debate, their intent is to seek truth and goodness. And because when you do that, and both people agree that each other are doing that, you can disagree for forever. You can disagree for a really long time if I think you're doing so in good faith. When good faith turns to bad faith, we've got problems. And there are many people out there who are straight up bad faith actors. Not probably the easiest one to point out is Tucker Carlson. Perfect example of a bad faith actor. Most of the time, I think he's lying for his audience. Straight up. Honesty and sincerity of intention are critical to understanding each other's points and having any chance of agreement. When I present that I think something you think might not be true, or the notion something you are doing is bad, if you don't believe I'm doing so in good faith, then the suggestion will have absolutely no clout, regardless of whether or not I was right. When I admitted to both of you that I was now atheist, it seems ever since I've been accused of bad faith. I've thought it often feels like both of you think my reason and my intention for having my current positions and beliefs I hold as not honest, regardless of what I've described as my reasons. I would say this follows forward for my political views, my views on ethics, my views on sexuality, my views on responsibility, my views on parenting, my views on mental health. It's really tough to overstate the variety and depths of topics we disagree on. Let me explain what I mean in more detail. I provide reasons for how my beliefs have changed in the process of intellectual discovery that has led me to those changes. Often when those reasons are presented, they're dismissed as a facade or a half-truth. I can think of a dozen quotes that sound something like, "Come on, Alex, you don't really believe there's no such thing as Satan." Another example is, "That's just what you say so you don't have to take responsibility." These types of dismissing statements and their cousins hurt me deeply. That's the prompting for this letter. I know we share common values of truth and moral goodness, and if we can move past this type of dismissal, we can forgive each other and find better ways to communicate. I was really reaching out with this. I was really hoping that we could meet in the middle somehow. I went on to say, the reason these are bad faith dismissals is they make assumptions about what I think and what I honestly believe and how I came upon those thoughts and beliefs. It's understandable. Your worldview is neat, tidy, and all-encompassing. God explains everything, and so anything that contradicts or disagrees with how God says it must be dismissed. My stated beliefs put me in this category as a person. I contradict and disagree with what you believe God says, and so it feels that I must also be dismissed. I'm hoping in appealing to a value higher than God himself, truth, we can find common ground one level higher. It's our only hope of meeting each other in any kind of intellectual middle. I can feel an objection to the statement, value higher than God, coming up, so let me try and knock that down so we don't get stuck there immediately. And now I'm recognizing that in my parents' eyes, God is the highest value. But the only reason they think that is because he is the source of truth and moral goodness, so no value could be higher than God. They still wouldn't place God itself above truth, because if God was fake or untrue, they wouldn't believe it. And so I tried to demonstrate that, and I got a little philosophical. God exists is a statement of fact or truth claim. Yahweh exists is a different truth claim. If someone you just met says, I believe in God, but you come to discover that what they mean isn't Yahweh, the God of Abraham, then you will say that they don't quite believe the correct truth claim. This is what I'm saying, why I'm saying truth is a higher value than God himself, even for you. Be honest with yourselves. If something, however seemingly impossible, were to demonstrate that, quote, Yahweh exists, end quote, was not a true statement, you would no longer believe it. We as human beings simply cannot believe things we don't think are true. If I offer you $10,000 to believe that there's currently a pink elephant sitting atop your head as you read this, you cannot believe it, even if you try. You will demand some evidence of its presence, or some way to know it's there before you genuinely believe it. At the end of the day, beliefs aren't a choice. I don't believe that 2 + 2 = 4. I know. The reason I know is through the sensory experience of adding 2 and 2 together like we do in elementary school. I cannot change my belief to think that 2 + 2 = 5, because when I try to verify it, my experiment will fail every time. I can't make 5 from those numbers no matter how hard I try. So I'm trying to demonstrate this value of truth here as often as I can in this next section of the letter. Such is the case, even with very complex beliefs. You can believe based on 1,000 factors, some perceptible and some imperceptible, that The Great Gatsby is the greatest novel of the 20th century. You might even say, nothing can change my mind, but this is untrue. You believe that statement is true or you wouldn't have uttered it, and you believe it's true based on a variety of facts about literature. These facts would include statements like some books are better than others, there was a set of books that was written in the 20th century, there is a measurement where we can come to an objective distinction about what makes some books better than others, some narratives had higher order meanings and those have intrinsic value, human value, etc. You would have to understand and believe each smaller belief about literature to understand and believe the first claim. But also what we need to do is change your mind about one of those facts to then change your mind about the claim. Maybe someone convinces you that we can't have an objective measure of how good a book is. Well, then you can't say The Great Gatsby is the greatest novel of the 20th century, because you don't believe that that statement is logically possible. These are the types of reasoning and higher order thinking that can apply to all human thinking and learning. Logic and truth are higher levels than God. He must be logical and true, or he cannot exist by definition. God cannot be a square circle. That statement is logically impossible. Therefore, nothing can be a square circle, not even God. God cannot be false, or you wouldn't believe in him, just as we established. If we can agree that these are the ways we get the things we value, including truth, and if I can hopefully convince you that I hold my views now in good faith as I search for that truth, then we can have a better relationship. I believe this down to my toes. If you're hearing this, tell me how that's not a perfect fucking opening to a letter to try and find common ground. I certainly felt like I'd made that point well enough at this point in the letter, so I went on to say, if I haven't lost you, I'd like to explain some facts in history that led me to where I am today. I call it my Jenga Tower of beliefs. I started as you raised me believing the following were absolutely true. Yahweh, God of Abraham, is the creator of the universe. Absolute truth about Yahweh is contained in the Bible. Therefore, all facts and truths must not contradict the Bible. This is what my worldview had been in syllogistic form. I believe it's the best way I can describe your views as you hold them still today. Syllogisms are useful in logic because they help establish a conclusion drawn from two premises or assumptions. They help make those, two or more for that matter. They help make those more complicated beliefs a bit simpler to talk about and digest. As I stated earlier, for this complicated conclusion to be disproven, something would have to demonstrate that one of those two premises is false. For both of you, this has never happened. But for me, it has. And so now I'm trying to show them that it's not like I just started believing some other random truth. It's just that I found reasons to question these other two statements. Another important distinction is how syllogism works. In philosophy, first you have to draw a logical conclusion from premises. You don't start with a conclusion, then look for premises and evidence that support it. I've noticed that for many theologians and Christians, they work backwards from a conclusion and try to find evidence and premises that fit their conclusion. This isn't meant to be offensive take in any way, but in 15 years of watching debates, this does seem to be like what most believers are up to. It's even wired into the word believer. I believe the conclusion Therefore, I'll look for evidence and ideas that support my conclusion. What I'm asking is that you consider that this is the wrong approach and one you wouldn't accept for any other truth claim. If I say I believe ancient aliens influenced human history and helped us build the pyramids, then you would rightly show me disproving evidence and making an argument that sounds like this. There's no evidence aliens exist. So now I'm trying to demonstrate to my parents what a counter-argument is here. We have simpler and better explanations for events in human history, therefore it's extremely unlikely that aliens influenced ancient human history. You would rightly stop them from starting from a conclusion they already thought was true. You wouldn't accept this from any other serious truth claim. If I told you I thought the flying spaghetti monster created the universe and wanted us to worship him, you wouldn't allow me to show you my evidence about what the flying spaghetti monster has done for my life, or how we know his nature, or let me show you his holy book. You would challenge me on the first assumption, which is that a flying spaghetti monster exists in the first place. You would tell me that the burden of proof lies with me to demonstrate that I have a very good reason to believe that a flying spaghetti monster exists. I couldn't do it, and then you wouldn't take a single other thing I said on the matter seriously. The idea that God or gods exist is a premise, not a conclusion in philosophy. Now, that's not really true. I mean, it can be a conclusion, but in their world, they think that that's a foregone conclusion. I'm trying to demonstrate that it's not. It has to be demonstrated to be factual for any other conclusion or reason to be done from there. What happened for me with God was that I realized that I had always, for the entire time I was a believer, just accepted that God exists was true. I started having doubts about the premise Yahweh around the time I was in high school. As I sharpened my tools of reason and science and intellectual discovery and the ability to logically debate, some things presented doubts for his existence or the truth of the Bible for me. I stumbled upon them like stumbling upon any other discovery. Once I accepted that I didn't have good enough reason to accept the premise that God exists and the creators of the universe, I started thinking about whether or not I had good reason to believe the universe was created at all. And so, because I already can feel myself as I was writing the letter saying something that's going to sound so crazy to them, that I wanted to extend another olive branch just to try and see if I could pull them in. So I went on to say, for centuries, humanity at large believed the earth was flat. Once you look at the evidence, however, it becomes a lot harder to believe that. This is what happened for the ancient Greek philosophers. 300 years before Jesus was born, Aristotle, Pythagoras, and some other astronomers and thinkers were making arguments against their rivals that the earth was spherical and not square or flat. Some of their reasons were bad, as we discovered later, but their math was spot on. Once they had the math correct for the Earth's diameter, it was impossible to argue with them for the remaining descending few. This was because incredibly precise calculations and predictions could be made with the math. Some of the less educated in the rest of the world hung on, however. And we've seen some of this in the modern age. Of course, I'm referring to the nonsensical flat earth movement. This is madness because Magellan brought even the uneducated remaining flat earth believers into the fold when he circumnavigated the earth. He demonstrated physically that the mathematical predictions had been true and helped map out what's now the known Earth. It was no longer possible to maintain a belief in the flat Earth, and anyone who remains is now ridiculed, and rightly so. You should be ridiculed for ridiculous beliefs, because that's one of the ways we stop believing in things that are so patently false and move closer to truth. I think at this point, it's worth thinking about how much criticism the progressive thinkers that embraced the spherical Earth theory in 400 to 250 BC must have gotten. When everyone knows the Earth is clearly a flat surface and some people challenge that widely held assumption, it invites a remarkable amount of backlash from the larger group of people. This is because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and those at the time that disagreed didn't feel that they had met the threshold of enough evidence, because they were discredited and mocked, even the intellectual circles. What's most important to remember is that they were right all along. Let me say that again, regardless of how crazy and contradictory or shocking they were, we know today that they were without a doubt correct, and those criticisms were too hasty and dismissive. So I'm trying to draw that contrast for my parents to realize that maybe these modern atheists had something to say that was worth listening to. It's in that spirit, I hope you consider the positions I hold today. Maybe I'm wrong about them, or maybe I'm right for the wrong reasons, or maybe I'm right for truth's sake, or maybe I'm wrong about all this and I started to be wrong as soon as I started to drift away from God and the church. but it was always with the goal to seek absolute truth. I wanted to be certain what the truth was. It would have been easy for Anaximenes, who opposed Pythagoras, to dismiss his pursuit of a round earth as a bad faith effort to gain some kind of human selfish reward. It's much harder to deal with someone's claims of good faith and trust that their pursuit is true. But in the end, it was, in fact, a good faith pursuit of truth. My current beliefs are also a good faith pursuit of truth. I went on seeking if my Jenga Tower of beliefs was constructed correctly, and kept finding certain bricks to take out until the whole thing collapsed on itself. So this is the end of that olive branch extension. I kind of get into the third leg of the letter here. And again, the whole goal of this is to get them to change their opinion of why they think I'm an atheist. Because they think I'm an atheist just so I can live a life of sin. That's what I'm trying to deconstruct in the best way that I can. Let me at last explain what I mean by the Jenga Tower. Of course, you played the game, so you know how it works. So let's imagine for a moment each brick represents one premise or simple belief. One brick might be faith is a virtue. Another brick might be there was a worldwide flood. A brick could even be simpler, like the universe was created. Or even simpler still, the universe had a beginning. There are also tons of other beliefs in this tower about concepts like miracles are possible and preachers are more educated on the Bible. And I could go on about all of it. All of these single premise bricks make up one big conclusion: the Christian world view. My whole tower was that Christian worldview. What happened with me over a number of years, I started to have reasons to doubt the premises that I had accepted since I was a kid, one at a time. Probably one of the earliest I doubted were things like Noah built an ark for all the animals. For starters, there's no way, given the sheer insane number of species of animals, that the Bible was correct about this, as it's translated today. Additionally, the animals are all part of the food chain. They're sustained by eating each other most of the time. So 2 of each animal wouldn't have even been enough to survive the trip. Then there's the reproduction problems after the flood, and I could go on. So it's for sure that this story wasn't exactly how it was in the Bible. At least to me. Then I started to doubt more basic concepts, like faith is a virtue. Where in our life, outside of worship of God, was faith ever a virtue? If someone says, I can fly this plane, trust me, you probably don't take that on faith. If you search yourself, you don't take any important claim on faith. So in its place, I had to find a new brick to put on top of my tower. Reason is always a virtue. As I did this, one by one, I hollowed out the original tower until it collapsed under the weight of my new premises. I had to build an entirely new worldview. It wasn't because of a trick or because of some selfish, sinful women desire. This was an arduous and painful process. I mean to say it was immensely painful. There is a concept called cognitive dissonance. It's defined by psychologists as follows: the state of having inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, especially as related to behavioral decisions and attitude change. It causes psychological distress when someone does things that go against the things they believe. I still had many habits and actions that were related to my original worldview that had become more and more painful as my worldview began to change. It's important to realize that insofar as you believe we have free will and choice, they clearly didn't play a role in this change in beliefs as I've told you this story. And by the way, who would choose this? Who would choose knowingly a path that leads to alienation from their parents, loss of friends and human connection, loss of social structure that brings joy and comfort like the church, and further public shame when they bring up this new belief? Being atheist doesn't just affect my relationship with you, but it affects me in my professional life in ways that are frankly total bullshit. Somewhat recently, I was discussing with a coworker my plans for a given weekend. This was his response. This was a response to his prompting, "What's everyone doing this weekend?" I didn't even start the conversation. He did. When I responded with, "I'm going to a meeting for the Iowa Atheists and Free Thinkers," I was later pulled aside to be told that we don't talk about that here publicly. Where the hell is my freedom of religion there? If a Muslim said they were going to a mosque or a Christian said they were going to church, that passes without controversy. This belief, or lack of one, is always met with stigma and ire. No one would choose it willingly. I didn't choose this. I followed a path of intellectual discovery and truth-seeking. I followed wherever the evidence and facts took me. My experience is my own and very different from yours. You may be confident that all the facts and all the evidence point to God exists, and specifically the God of the Bible. You might think you don't need all the facts and evidence to believe it. I take when you say those things in good faith that you believe what you say and have reason to believe what you do. I'm asking for the same respect and appreciation for the process I went through. I'm asking for you to see my beliefs and worldview in good faith. I mentioned about the pain that I feel over all this, and I want to close out with this. My entire life, acceptance from you has never come in a way that feels satisfying. I should have capitalized that sentence because it is the principal pain that I feel. My entire life, I've never been accepted by my own parents in any kind of serious way. I think this letter has dealt with the root of why that is. Accepting me means accepting who I am as a person. I'm a philosopher and deep thinker and an intellectual. I'm a relentless fighter for moral goodness in the world. I'm focused on a pursuit of truth and what is good. My beliefs are core to who I am, and when they are dismissed as bad faith cover-ups for sinful desires, it crushes me. It denies one of the most important and difficult pursuits of my life, and one I actually view as a major accomplishment. You may not realize it, but I have watched over 50 hours of debate tape on atheism versus theism. I have read about 30 books on atheism, theism, and the arguments for each. I have read Christian authors and atheist authors. I have had conversations and debates with people on both sides. I have learned a great deal about secular science and alternative worldviews and spent tons of my education time to understand the universe as truthfully as I can. I listen to podcasts and speeches and events and audiobooks in the car, still to this day, always learning more. I have a relentless goal of understanding the truth about the universe, and I feel I have come the closest to it as I possibly can because of those efforts. To deny and take that away from me is to deny one of the very things that makes me who I am. And when people do that to you, folks, you do not accept it. You don't allow it to continue. You reject it. You fight back. You have to. You have to. You're not helping yourself when you let it continue. And I refuse to. I sometimes wish this was possible to ever talk about with you or look at and watch some of the debates I have so that we can calmly and respectfully discuss where we disagree. But it seems impossible. I'm reminded of when I shared the book Jesus Interrupted with Dad, and the only amount of time you're willing to give it was one chapter. It's a collection of a man's life work in pursuit of understanding the Bible, and you dismiss that out of hand. This is how I feel as well. I feel you do the same to me, your son, as you did to Bart Ehrman. You assume bad intentions or malice, and then dismiss the things that are said based on that assumption. This is the bad faith I'm concerned with, and I hope that's been clear. I love you both. I'm glad I got this off my chest. I hope you take it to heart, and ultimately, if it does not change your view even slightly, to me it was worth all the thinking and writing. Please forgive me for continually approaching this the wrong way. It's a difficult thing to talk about, and often my strong emotions have prevented me from speaking clearly and fairly, and for that I'm sorry. I hope this letter serves as a fix for those emotional outbursts. They come from a place of pain and lifelong struggle. They say nothing about my real feelings toward both of you. With love and admiration, your son. Anybody still with me in chat? Because that's a perfect letter. It really doesn't get better than that. This is what I wrote to them 7 months ago. Pang, good to see you, buddy. This is what I wrote to them 7 months ago, and I almost made it the whole time without crying. It just really hurts because to do your best to pour your heart into something like this and to truly give it your all, give it your best effort, the best you can muster. I mean, I genuinely don't think I could think of a better way to say this. I mean, I could have improved some things slightly, but the main meat of the story was here. And for it to not even be worth their time. Until, of course, I didn't tell my dad happy birthday. Congrats, Dad, on being 70. You may now draft Social Security. You know, 30 years is a long time to have a son. Takes maybe 45 minutes to read this letter and really digest it. Maybe an hour and a half tops. And it just was never worth their time. 7 months later. And when I tried to point that out, and I tried to point out how fucked up that was, I got doubling down and tripling down. And this is the moment where I said, enough is enough, and I'm not taking it anymore. And I'm standing up for myself until I get this basic level of good faith from them. And it is why someday my mother will be on her deathbed. My father will be on his. They both have currently untreated and undiagnosed health problems that I can already see from the outside looking in because they think God will heal them. And I will not be there. I will not be there. And I think I'm morally justified in not being there. I don't think you sacrifice time and energy for people who don't love you and show disdain for you and don't trust you, care about you, or actually, like, letting me sleep in their basement means nothing. They don't care one lick about who I am as a person. They don't because their religion has convinced them that I am on the other side of a holy war. I am on the other side of a spiritual war. This is part of what Christopher Hitchens was talking about when he wrote, God is not great, how religion poisons everything. Insofar as people are moderate and acceptable religious people, is usually to the exact degree that they don't believe. Because my parents are some of the most devout, serious believers. If you listen to the first part and heard their letter and some of the ways they respond and all the scriptures they quote, they really shape every moment of their lives around the scriptures and their belief in God. And doing so is what led them to this point, to reject their own son for having a different opinion, for having a different intellectual pursuit. Not even a pursuit, the same pursuit, just a different result. That's what's truly poisonous. And it hurts, but it was the right thing to do to cut my parents off. And there's a lot of other people out there struggling with religious trauma. And I just want to take a minute to say, therapy's great. Finding yourself a family that loves you and truly accepts you for exactly who you are is way more important than any family you'll ever have by blood. And I'm so grateful to those people in my life. There's really too many to name. But I've had these people that have helped me get to where I am while I was going up against all of this every day of my life. And when we had to move back in with my parents 2 years ago, I settled into a pretty deep depression. Pang in chat there, honestly, he doesn't even know how much the Yang game and Yang Gang and him and so many others really saved me from the darkest depths, because it was a moment of hope at one of the worst times. I didn't know how I was going to survive living with my parents. Because it's just every single day, people who are supposed to love you and care for you, judging you and telling you that the reason why you're in their way and you're in their space is because of your own decisions of being separate from God, and how none of it would be that way if you would just believe. And just that fundamental denial of who I was as a person really, really brought me down. And there's a lot of people who go through this. It's so much more. It's so much more than suicide bombings and religious wars and all of the other things that you think about when you think of religion being used evilly. I mean, my parents use religion as literal fuel for their narcissism. They literally think they are perfect, righteous beings made whole in the image of God that have perfect advice for everyone they talk to on matters as far as health and decision-making and morality and right and wrong. I mean, these people claim to have the ultimate truth in their hands in the Bible. Hello, Josh J. I'm not sure who that is, but welcome. I appreciate you. They really believe that they have prescriptions that can work for everyone. And it's this type of arrogance and self-centeredness that is truly narcissistic. And I mean, you even see it in evidence of what they say. The perfection of narcissism is saying, God loves me. Don't you know? Because I believe in him. Look what he did for us. He helped us get a banker to refinance our house so that we can remodel it and sell it for a profit. He helped us have good jobs. But something bad happening to your life? Well, that's because you're not faithful enough. What is more narcissistic than that? And yet, can't you think of Christians even much more mild than my parents that talk this way? And if you aren't talking that way and you're a believer, well, do you then not think that a personal God intervenes in the world? Because if God just started the engine, sure, happy birthday, Annie Gurr. I hope you have a fantastic birthday. Birthdays are awesome. You should celebrate. I'll always do those shout outs. And I appreciate you for loving my content because I put a lot of heart into it. If someone isn't exercising this kind of faith, and they're saying in some way, I don't think God necessarily favors believers versus non-believers. I don't think he answers prayers. Well, it's to the exact degree that they're not a believer in the God of the Bible, that they're acceptable, that they are not being narcissistic like this. Because that kind of belief, well, I don't know who Josh J is, but he just earned a moderator action from me. So I assure you, my friend, nothing of what I said here was racist. Oh, come on. There we go. Yeah, take a time out. There you go, pal. If you actually listen to what I'm saying, you will find out that race was never involved. I am talking about beliefs and how they change behavior. Really, when faith is being used as a way to say, that God intervenes in certain people's lives and not in others. It's a way to just be blind to so much suffering in the world. And in my parents' case, the suffering they're the most blind to is mine. And they think they're justified in being blind to it because I separated from myself from God. I did it to myself. It's my fault. I say hell no. And if you ever find yourself in this situation, you should be confident in saying hell no. My success is my own. My strength comes from me. My ability to make my own way in this world is my own. My suffering is the same as any suffering out there. It's suffering that comes to us from all kinds of different sources because we are human, and that is the human condition. This is a cruel, harsh world. 5 million kids die before the age of 5 every year. What did they ever do to deserve that? Nothing. Disease, famine, struggles. We all are mortals. And this world is harsh to our existence. And that's okay. What makes it better is that we do it together. But I can't be together with people who don't accept me for being who I am. And I certainly can't do it with people who think that they have a right to judge me and tell me that what I'm doing is wrong and do so in a way that is not justified. And you should be confident in doing that too. And that's what I've done. It's why I have, to borrow the word from the Catholic Church, excommunicated my own parents. And I'm going to focus on my show. I'm going to focus on trying to make American democracy better, as I've talked about previously. I'm going to focus on trying to be the best husband, father, district manager, and citizen that I can be. And I'm going to do so really, really well, and all of those accomplishments will be my own. And I'm most importantly going to always be here to support others that have gone through these things or are still going through these things and help them find strength and courage, because some of this is the hardest shit anyone's ever had to go through. And I can just tell you, it was like none of this is easy decisions. I think the narcissism may come from the cognitive dissonance you wrote about. They have to hold on to their faith because it attacks their own being. Defending one's own being can take the form of narcissism. And yes, absolutely it can. And that's part of why in the beginning of this letter, and I'm glad Peng just mentioned that because this is a good thing to note on. This is why I say it's important to come back to this hierarchy of values, right? Because at the end of the day, that cognitive dissonance comes from your actions are not agreeing with what you believe, and what you believe, there might be some conflict there. You might need to figure out what's true underneath of it. And if we can agree on these 3 values, I really mean that, and put truth as the most important value above all, because it's the one that makes everything else tick. It's the one that makes the world go round. If there's anything that is good about the world, we have to know what's true about the world first. If that's true, then we can have those conversations in pursuit of truth and go back to the basics without harming each other and do it in a good faith way. This is what's great about philosophy and debate and the Socratic method and trying to learn things. So when I talk about topics on this show, or anywhere for that matter, that seem highly contentious, it's because it's in this pursuit of truth, because we all get better the closer we get to truth. And I'm glad I was able to share my story with all of you tonight. It's been a lot. It's been a very hard first Christmas. It felt very weird on Christmas Day to not include my parents and my plans. The biggest thing that I felt guilty over was separating my children from them, but I now realize I'm protecting them from the same harm that was done to me. And really, I wish I had had the strength earlier in my life to defend myself from it as well, but I'm here now, so no time to regret. It's just time to move forward. I really appreciate everybody who stuck it out. We had a great stream tonight. I hope this story can help others. And if you know somebody it can help, if you know somebody that all this information can mean something to you, please share it with them. And the full recording will be live on YouTube. And other than that, we're going to close it out. But thank you all. Thank you, Peng, for coming. Thank you, Edgers. Thank you, Essie and Lion Turtle and everybody, and Liam and Crab. There was a lot of people here tonight, so I appreciate it. It's been real.